Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Legal Muscle with Rick Collins, Esquire. Rick Collins is past president of the Nassau County Bar Association, founding partner in the firm Collins, Gann, McCloskey, and Barry. You want to find out more about how you can get a hold of them for representation, steroidlaw.com. Write that down on your hand, guys, right now, steroidlaw.com. You might need that someday. Also, of course, best-selling author of the book Legal Muscle, and for the past 20 years, contributing author from Muscular Development magazine. Please welcome now from New York, Rick Collins, Esquire.
Thank you, Ron. I don't know where the years went, man. They just flew right by.
You still got a nice head of hair. I mean,
and I'm wearing my October vest. So, so here we are. Fall has fallen, man.
That's fall colors. You're right. I suppose I wouldn't know, but so we did a few weeks ago, a couple weeks back. We tried to cover. This is 20 years. It's 20 years of columns. That's about 250 columns, if my math is even remotely correct. It's been a lot. So we covered the first 10 years, and today we're going to try to cover highlights of the second decade of busted legal muscle and muscular development. I hope you come out with a really cool accent. That Southern State Trooper last time was gold.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun, man. Yeah, that was a good time. And I've picked another 10 columns out of the 2011 to recent, and there's so many others. Steve Bleckman has really let me write pretty much whatever I wanted to write about in terms of anything where bodybuilding and fitness intersect with culture and politics and what's going on in the world and current events. So it's been a lot of fun, and we could certainly do a lot of others at some point in the future. But I picked 10, which hopefully will be representative of some of the fun we've had these past 2 decades.
Okay, so let's begin. In November 2011, this is a great title. I don't remember what this was about. Captain America. What was that column about?
Yeah, so somebody had asked me about the idea of Captain America, which if you think about, Captain America was a comic book character created by a guy named Joe Simon, a writer named Joe Simon in 1940. And if you think about what was going on in 1940, right? The Third Reich is marching, Hitler is doing his thing. And so Captain America was created as an intentionally patriotic hero, the most patriotic of all superheroes by far, right? Red, white, and blue, representing America and American, ideals. The very first episode, the first, installment, the issue of the magazine, the comic book with Captain America was him punching Hitler in the face. True story. So, you get what it was all about. But Captain America was actually the alter ego of this kid, Steve Rogers. And Steve Rogers was from Brooklyn. And Steve Rogers was so scrawny and puny and weak that he was actually wouldn't be accepted in the military. So he enrolls in this super secret experiment where he's given this serum, which is a performance enhancing serum, which causes him to get super strong, super muscular. Suddenly he's the opposite of the puny kid that he was. And this sort of process becomes celebrated as just an amazing technology. How wonderful this hero, this enhanced hero is, right? And obviously we can make some parallels to performance enhancing drugs, which have been part of America for many years, right? Yeah. Coincidentally, testosterone was first synthesized in 1935, just a few years before Captain America. And there are those who claim that in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, the Germans had already started using testosterone as a performance enhancer. So, the Nazis are bad, Americans are good. What Americans do is good, even if it means enhancing synthetically one's performance abilities. And so the pharmacological wizardry became celebrated and is still 80 years later celebrated in the context of Captain America. And nobody's ever questioned, is this fair? Yeah. Is there something wrong with the use of a performance enhancing drug for an advantage over others? And arguably, sports are one thing, but war, is even more volatile, even more deadly. People's lives are on the line. And so I kind of put out there the idea of this chemically enhanced arms race being okay in the context of actual war, but being so radically differently viewed in the context of sports. And so my view was Captain America is the first synthetically juiced superhero in all of comic book creation.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Spider-Man got bit by a radioactive spider. Right. Superman's from Krypton. Our son gave him his powers. You go on and on, but I don't know. I'm not a comic book expert or nerd or geek or whatever you want to call it. Sorry, guys, but I don't recall any others being their superpowers coming from an injection, which that's, I believe, all it was simple, an injection of Serum X or whatever it was. So parallel.
And that was so strong of a chemical that he didn't need to work out. He got jacked just by the injection alone. Arguably steroids, there's some work involved, right? It's not just a magic potion. You're going to be busting your ass in the gym. Maybe you can even bust your ass harder in the gym than you would otherwise, but and recover quicker. But that can't even be said about the serum that Steve Rogers was taking.
And he only needed that one dose. He didn't need booster shots or anything like that, right?
Let's leave booster shots out of this discussion for today. For now,
he got the Johnson & Johnson. Okay, so right. Let's move on to. I love your little twists on. Obviously, you guys are hopefully all familiar with the ridiculous old movie, a propaganda movie against marijuana called Reefer Madness. In May 2013 issue of Muscular Development, Mr. Collins wrote a column called Beefer Madness. What was Beefer Madness about?
So it was a riff on the old Reefer Madness, marijuana craziness. And, we've dealt through the years with similar tactics used for performance enhancing drugs, right? The mainstream media would have you believe that one tablet of D-ball and your liver explodes, your kidneys fall out, you're suddenly in ICU.
Rage.
Right. And that's kind of what they've done. And the rage has been part of it. Another part has been the scares about teen use, right? The whole idea that there's this, I did a column that we talked about last time called Barbies for Boldenone, which was, citing this crazy Associated Press article that was claiming that 9-year-old girls are getting all juiced up on steroids. And so Beefer Madness kind of follows in that. And I looked at a study that had come out of University of Minnesota and Columbia, where they surveyed a bunch of kids, and the mean age was 14.4 years old at 20 different middle schools in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area. And they were kind of looking at what they considered muscle enhancing behaviors. There were 5 sort of categories. One was changed eating, one was exercising, another was protein powders, steroids, and then other muscle enhancing substances. And they asked the students how frequently, never, rarely, sometimes, or often they had engaged in these 5 different categories of muscle enhancing behaviors. And protein, steroids, and the other substances were the 3, quote, unhealthy behaviors. Those were the unhealthy ones. And they were kind of looking at this from a concerned standpoint. They found, according to their study, that 5.9% of the adolescents had reported having used steroids at least rarely. Now, look, you and I nobody's going to condone or say that the use of steroids by adolescents isn't something that we should be concerned about for any adolescents who may be using. But that number of 5.9 is completely out of step with all other studies and surveys that I've seen. I actually pulled up the most recent numbers on the Monitoring the Future studies, which looked at, according to a chart they have, just the last 4 years, 2017 through 2020. The numbers are well less than half of that. But it's interesting because according to Monitoring the Future, which are considered the most reliable surveys of steroid use, the lifetime prevalence for 12th graders in 2020 to have ever used steroids was 2%. Okay, which may make sense. For 10th graders was 1.7 lifetime. And for 8th graders was 2%, same percent as for 12th graders. That doesn't make any sense, highly questionable. I think it's quite possible that these numbers are inflated. So when you get to the numbers that, were coming out of Minnesota, doesn't really make a lot of sense. And the, one writer at Reason Magazine who looked at this study and sort of this cautionary scare about protein in young adults wrote, after all these years of media scare stories trying to terrify readers with worries about how kids are too sedentary and don't eat well, I suppose it's comforting to find a scare story about how teen boys are obsessed gym rats who consume lots of protein and very little fat. So, the idea that parents should be worrying about a protein drink instead of worrying that their kids are spending too much time at fast food restaurants is just another little nugget from mainstream media that makes us question the reliability of a lot of the information that we get from them.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to go off on a huge tangent, but mainstream media is notorious for manufacturing stories when it's a slow news day. There's nothing really going on. Let's talk about teenage steroid use is rampant, and you can pull statistics out of your butt basically with that. And who's going to challenge you on it? Who's going to call you on it? So, okay, let's move on to November 2015. This is a little more straightforward. I assume this had some biographical insights here. What bodybuilding taught me, because guys, if you know what Rick, he's all covered up in his suit here, but let me tell you, something I never had in my lifetime, 20-inch guns on this man. Yeah, legit.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Yeah, and I worked for every little eighth of an inch of that size. And, I've often been asked, what did I learn from bodybuilding and how do I apply it to what I do every day as a lawyer? And I do believe that bodybuilding can make you better at whatever it is that you do, the lessons that you learn, particularly in competitive bodybuilding, the lessons that you learn can be applied to so many other things in life. And I think I'm a better lawyer for it. This column was about, I kind of focused on basically one night, one single event. And it was my very first bodybuilding contest. I was probably 20 years old and had gotten up on the stage, and I took a second place trophy and got some. Back then they would give you trophies for like best arms, best legs, and that stuff. So I walked away with 3 trophies, and and it was the lessons I learned from that I can still apply today. And so I gave, in this column I talked about 3 lessons. One is just ignoring the naysayers, right? Because believe it or not, and I don't share this often. I'm not sure that I've shared it in a podcast before, but when I was 19, I was a passenger in a car that was involved in a horrific accident. And there were fatalities involved. I was actually in the back seat. I was thrown through the windshield, just a horrific accident. And we lost 2 died in the car, and I was all banged up. I broke my neck, I broke my back, I broke my wrist, my eye was all messed up. I was in pretty bad shape. I was hospitalized, and up until then, I'd been involved in bodybuilding. And I remember the doctors telling me, that's it, you're done. So you're not lifting again. You're never gonna lift heavy again. And like a lot of us, I think, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this have been told, one bit of bad news or another that's trying to limit them from the things that they want to do, including bodybuilding. And I ignored it. I said, like many of us, I was dedicated to it, and I wasn't taking no for an answer. And 2 years later, I was on a stage competing and winning trophies. And so, frankly, listening to those negative voices, you got to have it in your heart. If it's in your blood, you're going to be able to do what you want to do. And that lesson told me that, if I applied myself, I could do things that others were telling me couldn't be done. And I've had similar experiences in criminal cases where I've defended people and everybody said, oh, you're never going to be able to accomplish what you wanted to do. Maybe it's keeping somebody out of jail. Maybe it's not getting a not guilty verdict. And I've applied that same sort of, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going full at it. And I've had the confidence to move forward like that with really great results that have benefited a lot of people through these many, many years. So ignoring the naysayers was one. Another was just, preparing to win, being prepared to go in there and take it, and to take first place, and, to do your best in it. I remember that, the day before that show, and I know you've competed, and your quads are insane, and you've got, there you go. And it's clear that you've walked the walk as much as anybody has in this business. And but I remember, grabbing the skin, and I'm sure you've done it too, where you grab the skin off on your abs, and it's so thin it feels like cellophane. It's almost like wax paper. It's dry, and and I was prepared, and preparation, preparing to do what you want to do. All the time that you spend in the gym, all the time that you spend in the kitchen, all the time that you spend, preparing for that one night, that one, event, that's where it's won or lost, and I've applied that just in terms of things like cross-examination in the courts, where, I remember I cross-examined an endocrinologist a few years back, and on issues of dangers in research chemicals and different types of peptides. And I did my homework. I knew the medical literature better than anybody could have. And he actually tried to pull a fast one. And had I not known the literature the way I did, and was able to embarrass him and call him out for what was attempting to mislead the judge, I won that hearing because, at least because of the preparation, and being able to cross-examine him on that. And the other thing is just following your instincts. We learn that in bodybuilding in the gym, when we choose one exercise over another, or we sometimes you may make a change in your training program. You may do more sets. You may do, a different exercise. It's sort of allowing your instinct to dictate where you go in the gym and how you train, is something that, there's a science to things like cross-examination, but there's also an art to it. And being able to make those choices on the fly, and those decisions on the fly, and following your gut on a witness's credibility, or which strategy would work based on your experience. Those are all things that you can learn from bodybuilding, beyond the obvious, which is dedication and perseverance and working around. There's going to be injuries. We all get them at one point or another. If you're throwing heavy iron for years and years, some of them are going to be acute injuries, some are going to be chronic injuries. That's just the reality of it. But we learn to work around them, right? And to find ways of continuing. When I tore my tricep a couple of years back, and I did unilateral training with the other arm, because there's some evidence. The deal. Yeah, but unilateral training has a contralateral effect neurologically, and will limit your atrophy. I see people in the gym sometimes, maybe they have knee surgery, or they have elbow surgery or shoulder surgery, and they just say, I'm going to take a few months off. No, don't take any. I had surgery, and I was back in the gym 3-4 days later, one arm in a sling, and the other arm, I have great training partners. They would stack the weights on. So we would use hammer strength machines, and which there's lots of unilateral options now in gyms. Yeah. So I was able to do it. And these are all sort of lessons in life that you can apply to all of the things.
Perfect. Okay. Oh boy, here's one. I don't remember. My memory's horrible. June 2016, police officer prosecuted for clenbuterol. I've never heard of anybody prosecuted for clenbuterol.
Right. Yeah. Crazy, and I've represented so many really good, decent human beings, as a criminal defense lawyer. And this was another one. I found myself sitting in the trial room of a police department with my client, a good guy, a good cop, not a violent guy, no history of excessive force, none of that, being prosecuted in a departmental hearing for failing a drug test for, that some police departments now are giving to their cops. And so he failed the steroid and growth hormone doping policy for a positive for clenbuterol. And I remember speaking to the prosecutor and saying, do you realize that clenbuterol is a beta-2 agonist? It's an asthma medication in some countries. We use, albuterol here and not clenbuterol, but this is not a steroid and this is not growth hormone. And I remember her saying to me, well, we have a zero tolerance policy here. I'm like, zero tolerance about steroids and growth hormone? Yes, but this is not steroids and this is not growth hormone. I know, but we have a zero tolerance policy. And it was this circular conversation that, I would have been willing to negotiate some reasonable resolution of it, rather than rolling the dice in the trial room, which most police union lawyers will tell you is not a favorable venue for the police officer. All too often, it's kind of just a rubber stamp, and not many people win in the trial room. But this was a steroid case without any steroids. And so, and the police department called all sorts of witnesses. They flew in a toxicologist, they had a police surgeon, they had an investigator, they had a drug testing expert, all brought in at the expense of the taxpayers to prosecute this cop because he tested positive for Clen. And I brought in my own witnesses, and I had put my client on the stand, and I showed that, there's been positive for clenbuterol based on the consumption of dietary supplements. Jessica Hardy was an Olympic swimmer, if you remember, who in a very highly publicized contamination case tested positive because of the use of a dietary supplement. And I cross-examined the hell out of the department's witnesses. And, ultimately, the judge had to, make a decision, and the decision was in my favor, and we won in the trial room. And, but it's, you really look at some of the ways that, we spend this, taxpayer dollars in stuff that really makes no sense. And, I've heard that some police departments that had implemented steroid testing are now kind of backing away from it because of the testosterone replacement therapies and contaminated supplements and all these other things. Look, it's one thing if you've got a cop who is aggressive on the streets, who is involved in complaint after complaint of excessive force and is acting in inappropriate ways. Nobody wants that on the street. But this was not that cop. And I was, there's nothing like winning a trial. And so we're gladiators as trial lawyers. We go in there and, one wins, one loses, and winning is a great feeling. And it was a great feeling for him as well. And I was grateful to have been able to help him.
Yeah. You don't have to answer this, but I'm just curious. Do you have like a batting average for wins?
I don't know if I've ever really looked at that. And I don't know how you really even, classify what a win is. So I remember coming into a case where in Dallas, Texas, the prosecutor was one of the most aggressive and smartest prosecutors I've ever dealt with. But I had a client who was charged with steroids, but there was also pro hormones involved. There was a supplement store. There was all these other factors. And the prosecutor was initially looking for 8 years and crazy sentence. And the lawyers were looking to try to get a sentence of 3 years. And this was not a case that would involve cooperation or anything like that. And so, so I was retained to kind of try to fix this. And I was able to, over the course of months, show the prosecutor that he was wrong about the way he was calculating what steroids were, how, what was an anabolic steroid, what was a non-controlled prohormone. Bottom line, at the end of the day, the client walked away with probation without a trial. So is that a win or not a win because it didn't go to trial? To me, that's a huge win. That's not only a happy client, but a friend for life in that client. And a lot of my clients become my best marketers. My past clients become the people who, share my contacts with other people and go on social media and all of that, because they know how hard I work and they know how good my results are. So I would say my batting average is something that I'm extremely, extremely proud of.
Good answer. Good answer. Accurate answer. Oh boy. Here we go. Controversy. July 2019. T. I even hate reading words like this. I feel like I'm going to get canceled. Non-binary ID and bigorexia. Oof. This is all yours.
All right. So last episode we talked about one column I wrote, which was entitled "The Pregnant Man is Juiced,"
Yes.
And about sort of a trans person who retained female genitalia and physiology, and even though had transitioned to being a male, was able to become pregnant and to have a child as a man.
Wow.
And so so this one kind of followed up on sort of looking at these sorts of trans issues as compared to more traditional use of the same testosterone that is used to transition a female to a male, but legally and in a way that is accepted and maybe celebrated, versus a male who wants to use it for changing their own physiology to become more male, even though they are male, or to become more muscular. And that is not only not acceptable, but it's actually a crime that will result in the arrest of the person, the patient, even if they went to a doctor, and the doctor for felonious conduct in giving it over. And so I looked at this issue of bigorexia, which is, muscle dysmorphia disorder, as it's called, and or the Adonis complex. It's been named many things, but it's basically a pathological perception that's almost like reverse anorexia. You're never big enough. You're just 300 pounds with 5% body fat, and you are saying, "Look at me, I'm a mess. I'm, I look like a child," and so. Maybe there's a little bit of that in every bodybuilder, but obviously there's a spectrum. And so at some point that becomes truly pathological. And so you've got people in the same way that, a person may look at themselves and say, "I'm still not thin," when they really are thin. It can become problematic in anorexia and actually, ultimately potentially life-threatening.
Yeah.
So you've got the body dysmorphic disorder, and on the other hand, you've got a different kind of aspect in non-binary individuals who have a body dysmorphic, a gender dysphoria perception that they're in the wrong body. Yeah. Both share the idea that my body is not what I want it to be. My body doesn't conform with my subjective view of how I see myself. And that includes, when I say non-binary, it's maybe not people who want to fully transition. It's people who may just want a woman who wants to look more masculine and do it through the use of testosterone. And what caused my interest in this was there was an essay by a non-binary person who wrote the following. Basically, she had been prescribed low-dose testosterone. She was born female. She wasn't seeking a full gender transition. And what she said was, I'm non-binary. I'm not interested in presenting to the world as a man based on whatever antiquated physical criteria that might invite that assumption. When I took a small amount of testosterone that I did, the resulting physical changes were subtle. Over the course of months, my body fat redistributed, my shoulders broadened, my face changed from soft to harder as my jawline squared off. The starkest change was feeling much more at home within my body. So testosterone was used to bring her not to a transition, but to simply cosmetically feel better about the way she looked. If a male were to say that about a cosmetic change to make him more comfortable with the way he looked, his use or possession of that drug would become a crime. Yeah. And the doctor would as well. And so my point was not to in any way limit the ability of a woman who wants to feel more comfortable, really anybody who wants to feel more comfortable. If the medical technology allows it and it can be supervised and done safely, assuming all of those things, what's really the problem? And I think that the distinction between the two doesn't justify the wild disparity. It's one thing to say, okay, it's okay for a non-binary female to a male to do it, but we don't want to let males do it. Okay, so don't allow that for doctors to do. But the criminalization of it to the point where people can be arrested and have their lives completely turned upside down, that's a pretty stark distinction. And I think it really comes from really the use of steroids in sports and testosterone's performance enhancing effect. I don't think that socially we really have an interest in preventing a man from looking better. If that would make him feel better, look, we allow cosmetic surgery. You can get liposuction. You can get calf implants. You can get pec implants, bicep implants. We allow for all these cosmetic changes. But I think the distinction is really that testosterone also makes you perform better, bigger, faster, stronger, as Chris Bell's movie was titled. So, and I think that's where it all comes from. And I'm not sure that that's a sufficient basis to make that distinction.
No, it really puzzles me that it's looked at as cheating when men use, a 35-year-old professional man pays taxes, takes care of a family, pillar of his community. If he wants to use a little bit of test and deca, why is that looked down on? Why is that compared to someone cheating at the Olympics? Or there's no sensible parallel to it. I don't understand how it's still in 2021. We're still drawing that comparison. We're still putting it on that same level. It doesn't make any sense.
And the irony, of course, is that the vast majority of folks using steroids for non-medical purposes are not competing in sports. Right. They are purely cosmetic users, much more analogous to somebody who's going to a cosmetic surgeon for, Botox or liposuction or implants or any of the other stuff. That's really the closest parallel. It's a small minority of folks that are the, Olympic cheaters or, the athletes who are using it to get an advantage in sports.
Well, this transitions very appropriately into our next one, November 2019 issue of MD. Your column was titled "Masculinity and Other Hate Crimes."
Yeah. Boy. Yeah, well, that's you've been seeing probably in the media. It's kind of become kind of a meme, this idea that toxic masculinity is the root of all evil, that, men are the ones who are causing, all the social ills that we face because of testosterone. And I don't know if you're a fan of Sacha Baron Cohen.
A little bit,
Well, he had a show a while back called Who is America? And one of the characters was this Dr. Naira. And Dr. Naira was this ponytailed professor, ultra liberal NPR kind of guy who was the author. The character was the author of this book of complete self-loathing called Masculinity and Other Hate Crimes. So fully adopting that sort of anti-male and obviously that's satire and parody and a joke, but not everybody sees it that way. And there's actually a former Columbia University professor who had written some stuff, an essay called On Faith, God, Guns, and Testosterone, where he blamed testosterone overdose, societal testosterone overdose, and quote, toxic masculinity and quote, violent male tendencies for everything from mass shootings to virtually everything else that plagues our society, saying, quote, testosterone is a killer. And that's no joke, and so, could you imagine ever saying the same thing about estrogen? I mean, talk about, a completely sort of one-sided perspective. And so I kind of looked at the research on testosterone, and I'm actually working on a presentation for next year with a psychology professor named Jack Darkes, who I've written a lot with through the years, and we're going to do something about what's wrong with men. Is testosterone poisoning really the problem? How clear is the connection between testosterone and aggression? Are there other factors that weigh in? One of the things that we looked at was, and some of the research on the link between testosterone and aggression. And one researcher, probably one of the most well-known testosterone researchers, this Dr. James Dabbs, found that in young men, the strong relationship between testosterone and aggression existed only in the presence of lower IQ. So there are these, and that's just one of many, many variables that, may intersect with testosterone, so that, it's much more complicated. The idea that testosterone causes aggression, we know that there's differences between causation and correlation, right? So two things can occur in instances where, it looks like they're connected, but that connection isn't necessarily cause and effect. It could be correlation because there are other factors which impact. And so, that, I went through some of the research. There was, for example, there's the trolley problem in psychology. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but somebody is given the choice. So there's, you can pull a lever on a train. And if, right now the train is going to kill 5 people. But if you pull the lever and redirect it to a different track, it'll only kill 1 person. But you're now responsible for making the choice to kill that 1 person. So these are issues on sort of morality and moral judgment, and they looked at it in terms of testosterone, and what they found was that the correlation of the tougher moral judgments were not related to the use of testosterone as an exogenous substance, but was connected to testosterone in endogenous, higher level natural testosterone levels. So the bottom line is the correlation of testosterone and aggression and dominance is far more complicated than what the mainstream media will say. And the terms like toxic masculinity and testosterone poisoning are just oversimplifications of a very, very complicated, scientific literature.
Okay. Well, you just used this phrase, very recently here. It was January 2020. Zero tolerance and steroids. Tell me about that one, please.
So, you know, I was asked what's the best way to protect steroid users from hurting themselves, which opens up the idea of harm reduction, right? Harm reduction is a concept that says that you may not like some things that people do, but how do you make it safer? You know, it's common in narcotics and recreational drug, you know, addiction therapies and treatments. You know, you may not be able to stop a behavior, but until you can, and there's ways of limiting its harm. And so is that something you should engage in? So I looked at a policy that was instituted by the anti-doping Denmark, you know, authorities, which at least at that time, their protocols applied to 80% of Danish gym members. They fell under the jurisdiction of this anti-doping Denmark. And they had set up a website for counseling people who were interested in steroids, using steroids, you know, possibly going to use steroids, to give them information about steroids. But that's where the zero tolerance policy came in, because if somebody were to call and were to ask questions that dealt with relative harms, the response was, don't take steroids. So if the question was, would 10 grams a week of halotestin be better, safer than 200 milligrams of DECA a week, or would the DECA be safer? The answer was, don't take steroids. So that's a choice, right? You know, so you're making this judgment that you're better off just, you know, say no to drugs becomes the policy without any kind of nuance, without any, you know, harm reduction aspect. And what they found was that actually most of the people who were calling were not experienced steroid users. They were novices or people who really didn't know too much. And so I think, you know, harm reduction would have played a very important role in public health by, you know, 10 grams of test a week is not something that you should be doing, you know, period. And that, you know, we tell you not to do either, but that's much worse than 100 milligrams of test a week. And so these sort of zero tolerance policies, you know, in order to express condemnation, right? We don't like that. So we're going to have zero tolerance. That gets back to like the clenbuterol. We have zero tolerance on steroids. You lose all reason, nuance, you know, context. It all goes out the window with zero tolerance. We've read things where, you know, a schoolyard incident where a kindergarten acts like kindergartners sometimes do, but that then violates the zero tolerance policy regarding one thing or another, or a kid has a rubber band at school and that becomes zero tolerance on weapons. You know, I think zero tolerance can apply in some situations, but not in all situations. And that's exactly why zero tolerance makes no sense as a policy, as a blanket policy.
Yeah, just say no, which was Nancy Reagan's call to arms in the war against drugs, early 80s, failed miserably, miserable failure. So there you go. That's a whole other topic. Next one. Here's a fun one. I like the fun ones. July 2020. I missed the gym movies. What are the best gym movies, Rick, in your estimation?
So this was at the height of the pandemic, and you know, somebody had asked for something to inspire training, and so I started to think about, you know, some movies, and a lot of them were, I think, you know, movies that every bodybuilder has seen multiple times. You know, Pumping Iron, obviously. You know, there was a Raw Iron, The Making of Pumping Iron, which came out in 2002, you know, which was a whole lot of outtakes. I don't know if you saw that one, but it's worth seeing. I think I pulled it up on YouTube, actually. You know, Generation Iron, you know, and its sequels, Bigger, the story of Joe and Ben Weeder and how they kind of started the IFBB, and as counsel for the IFBB Pro League for a number of years, that interested me because I used to deal with Ben Weeder all the time on the phone with various little legal issues that came up over the years. But a friend of mine, Alex Ardenti, did a movie called Sups a couple of years ago that you may have seen, and a lot of people in the industry were in it. The timing for me just didn't work out for the dietary supplement and sports nutrition industry. Obviously, Predator and Terminator 2 and even Conan. I'm a fan of the Rocky movies as well, other than maybe Rocky 5. That I think Stallone has pretty much renounced that and has asked everybody to pretend that was never part of the canon. But sometimes I'll when I need to be inspired, I'll watch Gladiator. Still one of the great movies. I don't know what your favorites are.
300. You got to put 300 in there.
Got to put 300 in there for sure. What else? What are your others that?
Oh boy. Oh man. And I mean, I like some of Enter the Dragon. I know it's
okay.
Love that movie to death. Jeez.
Well, if you like martial arts, if you like
blood sport with Van Damme was a
sure,
epic movie.
Absolutely. Yep. How about Hard Times? You ever see that with Charles Bronson?
Charles Bronson and William Smith, who just passed away a couple months ago. Because I remember being a kid and seeing that, and Clint Eastwood with a shirt off to me wasn't like anything special. But that guy, William Smith, he was in great shape. He was in Rich Man, Poor Man. He was in a lot of movies, and he had a fantastic physique.
Fantastic. The best triceps in Hollywood, I think. Just great. And I liked Rich Man, Poor Man for that too. Hard Times with Charles Bronson. Bronson had a great physique in that movie. It's about sort of like street fighting, paid for street fighting in the Depression, which was a really bare knuckles kind of fighting movie. One of my favorite movies recently. Well, I love The Raid. If you like action, crazy martial arts movies, check out The Raid. It's also called The Raid Redemption. It's basically an elite group of cops in Indonesia, in Jakarta, who are sent in to clean out this drug-infested high-rise, floor by floor. Oh, wow. And so it's guns, it's some of the best fighting you've ever seen. I also love a movie called The Night Comes for Us, which is, you can see, it's on Netflix. Just check it out. It is the most incredible fight scenes. Wow. If you like the John Wick movies, and that kind of thing. I mean, and Keanu Reeves does a good job. He trains like 6 months for the fight scenes and all of that. But Joe Taslim, who is the lead in The Night Comes for Us, is a jiu-jitsu national champion. So it's a whole nother level. And the fight choreography is like nothing you've ever seen. Watch The Night Comes for Us and let me know what you think of it. I also like a movie called District B13 or District 13 with a guy named David Bell, who was one of the founders of parkour. So the whole like free running, like jumping and that kind of stuff, that's a cop movie that's also really good. So, if you like those movies, check them out and let me know.
Fair enough. Yeah, we could talk movies all damn day. Here's a good one, especially in the United States, I believe we're the fattest country in the world. If not, I don't know who's beating us. March 2021, fat shaming or fat acceptance?
Right. Yeah. So, in the fitness community, we're probably generally maybe less forgiving of, obviously not everybody has the dedication to be able to be going to the gym 5 days a week, to doing the cardio, to spending the time in the kitchen, to meal prepping, to all the things that a lot of people serious folks in the hardcore fitness community do. We are now at a point where 40% of Americans are obese, meaning that they have a BMI of equal or over to 30, right? Wow. So, I mean, this is a national problem. Without question, because it's linked to as we've talked about through the years, it's linked to so many heart, diabetes. I mean, all these different risks are ratcheted up when you're obese. And so the question became, how do we deal with this as a society? And there is a movement. It's sometimes called fat acceptance. There's actually a movement called fat pride, where the idea is full acceptance of it. And there have been actually books and essays that sort of celebrate healthy at any size. There was a Cosmo cover not too long ago that showed a person who was extremely large and clearly not healthy, and with the statement, "This is healthy." So these are problems. And I think it comes from, to some degree, sort of the social justice movement, and everybody wanting to accept, and beauty is a different issue. Certainly beauty can be anything. It's a subjective thing, and everybody should feel good about themselves however they look. There's no reason for shaming. And so certainly there's issues with fat acceptance, and there's issues with fat shaming, because fat shaming doesn't work. Studies show that simply trying to rag on people to get them to lose weight sometimes backfires, and you never know what sort of issues have led to a person's weight gain. And sometimes there's issues of past trauma. And until you've walked a mile in somebody's shoes, you shouldn't be judging people. Yeah. So fat shaming shouldn't be on the table at all. But that doesn't mean that we should just throw up our hands and just say, okay, you're healthy at 500 pounds, So I think there is no one size fits all approach to the best way to deal with it. I think gently suggesting better choices is something that works for many people, maybe not all. But as a society, I think it's important for us to get healthy. And, during the pandemic, obesity was one of the, issues that was linked to more poor outcomes. Yeah. And yet we closed down the gyms for a period of time. And there was very little that the mainstream media did or said to encourage people to lose weight or to get in shape, or to, it was more about just staying home. And I'm not so sure that really had a beneficial effect.
Did not. Okay, last but not least, June 2021, 1001 reasons to shut up.
Yeah. And that's a riff on there's a statute in the US Code under a section 1001 in Title 18 that basically makes it a crime to lie to a federal agent who's asking questions in the capacity of his work. So this came up, and it comes up a lot because people sometimes want to protect themselves. They're maybe being suspected of doing something wrong. I had a guy who came to my office, and that prompted this, who said that he had a package on the way from an international package, and that it contained steroids. And that when he went on to track it, he found out that it had been intercepted, and there was enough indicating that there might be some ramifications, that would come from this, and wanted to know what he should do. And also said that if the law enforcement folks actually looked at his address for past packages, they would see a history of packages from China coming to that address. And so the question was, what could happen and what could he do about it? And I always tell clients, you can't change what happened. Whatever has happened, happened. We don't have a magic, time machine to go back and change things around. So stop worrying about that. Let's just make good choices from this point forward, right? Yeah. So the first thing that could happen is he might get a seizure notice. He might get something in the mail, a piece of paper, which would say that, hey, we're from the government, and we've got your package, and we've found that it contains something that we think is a controlled substance. And if you think that you're entitled to it, give us a call and we can talk about, returning this package to you.
Wow.
And it'll say that if you don't respond to us, we're just going to proceed and destroy the package. And most people simply don't respond to that. And that becomes the end of it. Although you got to be aware, you're now on the radar screen, right? So that address is now in the database. And so if there's more packages coming, there may be more aggressive action on the part of law enforcement. The next option would be if they don't send a seizure notice, they can come by for what's called a knock and talk. And a knock and talk is exactly what it sounds like. It's two guys in suits show up at your door, knock on it and say, hello, Mr. Harris, how are you? And we're here from the government and we're here to help. We have found something in the mail that puzzles us. And we'd like to talk about your package from China that you ordered. And when did you order it? And what was in it? And, why do you have it? And a whole lot of other questions. So, and then the third option would be that they actually they're a little more aggressive than that because they come with vests and guns out and a search warrant, and they come inside and they look through your whole house and they seize evidence. They seize any packages that are in there. They seize any steroids. They seize your computer and your phone, which may have records of transactions, et cetera. And so obviously, if they have a search warrant, you can't prevent them from coming in. They're going to come in. They're lawfully entitled to coming in. The time to challenge the search warrant is later when you have a lawyer involved. But what can you do in either a knock and talk or a controlled delivery to protect yourself? Okay, simple. Shut up. Shut up. Don't say yes. Don't say no. Don't admit. Don't deny. And the reason is, some people will begin to start denying. I didn't order this package. I don't know anything about steroids. All of these things that may be lies. And if they're lies and you're telling them to a federal agent, that's a crime in and of itself. So denial is not a good option. Denial of something that's true is itself a crime. So you don't want to do that. On the other hand, admissions are also not helpful because that's incriminating evidence that will be used in the case against you. In fact, sometimes there is no case until you open your mouth and confirm that, yes, you knew that there were steroids in the package, and yes, you're the one who ordered it, and yes, you used steroids. So you've actually walked yourself into a criminal case. So the best option is simply this. Don't admit, don't deny, say only this. I'd love to talk to you, but I can't. I have a lawyer, and my lawyer will contact you. Give me your card, give me all of your contact information. He'll explain everything to you, and shut up after that. Once you invoke your rights in that way, once you say, I have a lawyer, I can't talk without a lawyer, legally, that shuts down further questioning. They can't use what you say after that against you. You've now asked for a lawyer. And then if it's a knock and talk, they'll leave their card. I get calls all the time. The agents just left a card for me. They want to talk to me. Can you talk to them? Absolutely. And that's how I get involved in many cases. And that's the way that you maximally protect your Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights and privileges. And it certainly beats any of the other alternatives. So, and I tell that to everybody. And obviously in the course of this discussion, I'm not giving anybody legal advice. I'm just giving legal information about this. But certainly anybody who needs legal advice, you can reach out to me either through steroid law or through 516-294-0300, which is my office number right here in the office. And please, you could also follow me on social media. You and I are both very active. I've got an active Instagram page. And so Rick Collins ESQ, I'm easy to find. And I post stuff that I think, people may find interesting.
It is. It's not all legal stuff, guys. There's actually a lot of industry stuff and bodybuilding history and all kinds of stuff on there. Well, Rick, thank you so much for being generous with your time. We've now recapped 20 years of busted legal muscle. Yeah, where does the time go? I have no idea. It seems like 20 years ago was yesterday. But yeah, thank you so much for all you've done and continue to do. Rick is in the pages of muscular development every month still. We're the last print magazine in the industry. And it's an excellent column. It's always right near the back. It's easy to find. And it's always entertaining. It's never rehash. It's always brand new material. I find it fascinating. So yeah, guys, check it out. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time, Rick, and everybody.
My pleasure.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks,
Please subscribe, like the video, share the videos, do the thumbs up, do all that good stuff. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.